Good morning, everyone. My name is Dr. Enitan Oloto. Like she earlier said, I'm a lecturer at the University of Lagos, Nigeria. And so I want to start off by saying that 12 years ago, my first paper, I wrote my first paper on gender 12 years ago. There's a story why I'm writing the second paper 12 years later. And it's all part of the whole bias about writing papers. I don't have time to explain that, but I hope I'll be able to share that story. So this is my second paper on gender, even though I have always been gender inclined, interested in gender stories. When I started this research, I only knew a handful of female architects, including my colleagues at the University of Lagos. 3 prominent architects only stood out in my mind: architect Jumoke Ademowo, architect Nike Oshinowo, and architect Fifi. But I argue if they had more impact than the female architects I came to discover, I didn't realize that the research would avail me the audience of very dynamic female architects who had contributed immensely to the development of our built environment. And, well, it also gave me mentors who I had never had as a young female architect. In fact, one of them, architect Yinka Williams, asked me to wear her sash while I spoke today. So I am going to wear it because it's personal to them now. It's become very personal to them. So I hope I do justice to this. And I have not met her. And she sent it over to me, but we have a connection, yeah. So this topic is very important to her and many more that I encountered. Most of these women shaped the landscape and cityscape of our country, but are hardly recognized and for their works. So today, I bring you no architecture, rather I project the people behind the architecture. The project is ongoing, it's new, it's fresh. I'm also transforming as I'm doing it. And data are still being collected. And the desire is to capture and document the experience and works of these great women. Professor Eller said like 3 days ago, he said something. He said that architecture of the architecture is the human being. And I totally agree with him. I hope I got that right. It is the lack of this understanding that has successfully relegated female Black architects in Nigeria to the back. I do hope that the research throws more light on the challenges of the female architects in Nigeria. I hope it also provokes discourses that would advance female architect development in the built environment. I also propose and welcome action plans towards closing the gap of inclusion and equity. So the Leave No One Behind is the 2030 agenda of the UN, which was created in 2015. However, it has been the culture of women, whether subtle or provocatively, for a long time to agitate for inclusion. Post-colonial theorists state that women are oppressed by both patriarchal and colonial power. Thus, women are colonized in a twofold way by imperialism and male dominance. This is the typical scenario for women in the male-dominating construction industry in Nigeria. So I got this picture of Frank Lloyd Wright, and it will interest you to know that the issue of the struggles of women have not been today. It's been up there for a long time. The lady up there is Marion Mahoney Griffin. She was the first female architect in the world, licensed, and she was Frank's first employee. Unfortunately, they parted after 15 years because a lot of her works were not, Frank actually was a naughty boy, and he did not acknowledge her works, and they parted ways. So this is not the first time, that women have been, relegated to the back. So she eventually got married and started her own firm. There are several reasons for the exclusion and lack of equity amongst female architects in the construction industry. And these include our typical traditional ideologies, the patriarchal society, government policies that are not favorable to women, and general gender biases. It is not surprising that Howard Millar, an artist in 1943, designed a poster for the Westinghouse Electric as an inspirational image to boost the morale of female workers in the World War II factories. I do not know if it was a noble act of recognizing the importance of equity and inclusion in the workplace, or a propaganda that would be short-lived just to get women to work due to the shortage of men. But it worked then. There are also several constraints to inclusivity and equity amongst the female architects. Some of these constraints extracted from several literatures include gender bias, lack of representation, work-life balance, lack of mentorship, and several others as listed on the slides. These constraints were discussed during my visits and oral interviews amongst the female architects selected for this pilot work. Now, this picture, this was my studio 20-something years ago, and you can see those are my classmates. They're all big boys now, you know, and some of them are also, it's a large space, and that's my classmate Martha. She was half Malta, half Nigerian, and I wasn't in the studio that day. I mean, some of the things we're talking about now are one of the reasons why I actually worked outside the studio. But one thing interests me. You can see men at work. And that's what my classmate wrote. Men at work. I've had these pictures for a while, but it struck me when I was writing this paper. You know, because when we come into school, we come with this, there's this slogan, there is no gender in architecture. And we came, initially, when we were younger, it excited us. We felt special, that kind of thing. But as we advanced and grew, we actually realized we had been defranchised because there is gender in architecture. So that's the story behind this picture. The scope of this research was limited to female architects who were members of the Female Architects of Nigeria, a mouthful, FAN. The association, which had a challenging start, was set up in 1991 in Calabar. You can see me there, yeah, the tall lady up there. And after nearly 10 years of internal rancor, the council, which was predominantly male, had vehemently refused it being set up. In fact, Architect Williams told me that in the course of trying to get them registered, they'll go for council meeting, odd hours, different parts of the country, and they'll come back crying because they were not, but they decided they were not going to give up, and eventually it was accepted. The committee status was eventually upgraded to a subsidiary of the NIA, which is the Nigerian Institute of Architects. The initial concept of the founders was to start a social gathering where female architects bonded, and also the objective was to increase female architects' membership because women were discouraged by the many hurdles of registering. The founding fathers felt it was necessary to make it difficult, as it's believed that anything gotten with many challenges would be valued. It all seemed like an allied club, and I probably think it was. This discouraged women from registering, and FAN wanted to step in and increase, the representation of women. Now, this next slide shows one of the council meetings. You can see a sea of men, 1983. The arrow shows our first female president of NIA. The blue arrow shows architect Dada, who went on to become the first vice president of FAN. And from that little timeline, you can see that our first female architect president was gotten after 30 years of the inception of NIA. 20 years later, which is now, we have our second vice president of NIA. And in the next 4 or 5 years, we'll be having our third female. She's currently the second vice president of NIA. So the contraction is getting tighter and smaller. So we're hoping that it will improve, So this is the building of one of our, I said I was not going to show you buildings, but please forgive me, I lied. I lied. So, but I needed to show you this. Unfortunately, architect Dada Marquis, she's late now, and she just died 2 years or so ago. And it broke my heart that I never met this lady. these are very strong, iconic buildings. If you know Lagos, the CBD of Lagos Marina, that's the lagoon front, and you can see the 2 dots. She designed these buildings. And even I, as an architect, did not know that a female did this very strong, prominent building. And she has a lot of archives. So I'm just going to run through. I just wanted to show you, for want of time, these are several first female, architects, either as graduates, professors, and the next slide shows, that's the late architect Dada Marquis. She's the one that designed those 2 prominent buildings. We have our first female president architect, Ejiwomi. I just want to put a face and a name to these people who have been invisible. It's high time we start, showcasing ourselves. And that's architect Ajayi, who was the first Honorable General Secretary. Now, architect Ejiwomi worked in the ministry, and she has so many buildings that were attributed to her, but none of us know anything about it. And this is the first leaders of the female architects of Nigeria. And that's my wonderful new mentor, architect Yinka Williams, who gave me her sash. And so we get here. When I started this research, I was amazed and shocked. I compare my experience while trying to gather data as a semblance to the Dark Ages, where there was minimal documentation produced during that period. When I asked how I could get data on the number of females registered, I was shocked to know that there was none. No data. None. And I was like, what's going on? Now, we have 6,000 registered architects in Nigeria, but the institution cannot determine how many are female. And Yinka was just giving me estimates. Okay, 1,000 in Nigeria, 400 in Lagos, and I asked why. Now, we all have numbers. Now, the numbers do not differentiate. Normally, numbers shouldn't. But in the registry, there's no differentiation. We're all male. No gender, yes. So, we all know the importance of demography, as we all know that it is a powerful tool for tracking changes over time, for uncovering the needs or strength of a group or a community, to guide planning, policy development, or decision making. And it shocked me that after 64 years, we do not have any information. That also shows that female architects have been defranchised in the built environment. So let me quickly rush in. So these are comments, like I said, there were oral interviews I had with this woman. I'm just going to pick 1 or 2 that stood out. For architect Dada, when I was interviewing her, first I interviewed her online, and on a call, and she told me to come over. And she said, traditionally, a woman is seen and not heard. But in architecture, a woman must be seen and heard. And that was her struggle her entire lifetime. She had to insist that she must be seen and heard. Yes. Architect Yinka mentioned something. She said, no gender slogan in architecture limited the visibility of female architects. The Institute is only now trying to classify male and female in the 21st century. Then architect Zulai, she's from the north, and there's a peculiarity about their, culture. She said, one caveat is that a successful woman rides behind her male counterpart. She's married to an architect, so she's lucky because, her firm is, thriving, However, she said architecture is a collaboration that wasn't taught right from school, and this limited the women and affected inclusion and practice. Then the last person I want to pick is architect Akombi. She said the teaching pedagogy and training style has affected the inclusion and visibility of the female architects who are conservative. She also went on to say that the curriculum must be changed and the mode of practice which prohibits advertising, which is another thing, for our personal works. So, finally, what are the strategies towards the operationalization of the Leave No One Behind, using FAN as a vehicle to achieving these goals? There are several, challenges as seen on the slide, but 2 stuck out from our interviews. All architects agree that increasing visibility through documentation will increase inclusion. In fact, they unanimously felt there was a need to write a book or something, and also the need to set up a structured mentorship collaborative program between the students of architecture and female architects was highly necessary. Interestingly, while listening to Professor Amira and her current experience and trauma, and the works of Bonolo and Mologadi on monuments and landscape built to immortalize memories created from trauma, I remembered how I had cried while interviewing some of these women, realizing my own traumas as a Black female architect who was trained and who also practiced in Nigeria, and wondered if I could write on the effects of trauma from the training and practice on the quality of production of female architects in the built environment. So I'm beginning to think. In conclusion, this research hopes to trigger questions that will open more discourse. Questions like, has the architecture of female architects been true to self, or have they been lost in the years of subtle bias and oppressions in a patriarchal system? Why are the female architects and their works invisible, and how can we make both being and product more visible? How can we change the patriarchal architectural curriculum to influence future female architects? And what will be the design approach and practice of a female architect with less, patriarchal and decolonized systems? So, I just wanted to show you this quickly. While I was Googling, I Googled first female architect in Nigeria. And obviously, we do know that it's not Ademowo. So even Google, there's lack of information about us. We're invisible. We don't exist. And I think she's privileged to have the forefront, in the social media space. I don't want to go deep into that, but that's what Google gave me. And we begin to ask ourselves, where are the architects? These are the three women I mentioned, when I started my work. But now I have a village of women who are now my mentors that I didn't have when growing up. So the action plan. So basically, these are just a summary of the action plans we hope, documentation and publication, Then the depatriarchalization of the current approach to architecture and every other thing listed there. So this last slide shows some of our female architects. That's Professor Uduma, who is into landscape. And a lot of people have started diversifying from the core architecture into other things, Some of them are tired, stressed out. And this is Professor Cordiala Osanona and Osasona. Thank you very much. And she's gone into artworks, Those are bottle tops that she used to cover her, her wall. Those are plastic bottle tops that she's using to create art. And we have another lady there who's into, she's gone into, furniture making. And we have the lady that has a gallery now. So women are finding easier paths. And the question is, why? Genuinely, some of us still want to be in the forefront and core depth of architecture. Thank you very much.